I always thought the worst day of my life would be something I could see coming, a slow unraveling, a warning, a sign. But nothing prepared me for the moment my world shattered in a single cold instant. The boardroom was silent, the air thick with tension as my husband, my partner in life and business, looked at me with eyes I barely recognized. His voice was clipped, formal as he read from a prepared statement, each word slicing through me like ice. I waited for him to look up, to see me, to remember who I was to him. But he never did. Instead, he finished, closed the folder, and nodded to security. My colleagues, people I'd worked beside for years, looked away as I was asked to gather my things. My heart pounded, my hands shook, and I felt the sting of humiliation burn across my cheeks. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but the words caught in my throat. I never imagined my husband would turn on me so easily, so publicly, so completely. As I walked out, the world spinning around me, one question echoed in my mind, haunting and relentless. What if the man you trusted most believed the worst about you? It wasn't always like this. There was a time when my husband, Daniel, and I were inseparable, two dreamers who believed we could take on the world together. We met in college, both ambitious, both hungry for something more than the ordinary. Our first conversation lasted until sunrise, and by the end of that night, I knew I'd met someone who saw me, truly saw me, in a way no one else ever had. We fell in love fast, the kind of love that makes you believe anything is possible. When Daniel proposed, it wasn't just a promise of forever, it was a promise that we'd build something extraordinary, side by side. We started our company in a cramped apartment, working late into the night, fueled by takeout and wild ideas. Every milestone felt like a victory we'd earned together. I handled the creative side, Daniel managed the business, and our strengths fit together like puzzle pieces. We celebrated every small win, every new client, every late-night breakthrough. Our partnership was more than just business. It was the foundation of our marriage, a testament to our trust and shared vision. As the company grew, so did our reputation. People started calling us a power couple, and for a while, it felt like we really were unstoppable. We hosted team dinners, celebrated birthdays, and treated our employees like family. I was fiercely loyal to Daniel, always defending him, always believing in his decisions, even when I didn't fully agree. He, in turn, trusted me with the company's most sensitive projects, confiding in me about his fears and ambitions. We were a team, and I thought nothing could come between us. But as our success grew, so did the whispers. Some colleagues resented how close we were, how much influence I had. I noticed the sideways glances, the forced smiles, the way some people would go quiet when I entered the room. There were moments when I caught hints of jealousy, an offhand comment about favoritism, a joke that landed a little too hard. I brushed it off, telling myself that envy was the price of success, that as long as Daniel and I stood together, nothing else mattered. Still, the pressure mounted. The company was expanding, and with every new hire, the atmosphere shifted. I started to sense a divide, those who supported us and those who saw me as an obstacle. There were late nights when Daniel seemed distant, distracted by work or by something he wouldn't name. I chalked it up to stress, never imagining that seeds of doubt were being planted right under my nose. Looking back, I can see the cracks that were forming, the subtle ways trust was being eroded. But at the time, I was too busy fighting for our dream to notice the storm gathering on the horizon. I believed in us, in what we'd built, and I thought our love was strong enough to weather anything. But not everyone was happy to see us succeed together. It started with a rumor, just a whisper at first, something I dismissed as office gossip. But then, small things began to go wrong. A confidential file went missing. An important client suddenly pulled out of a deal, citing a breach of trust. I worked late, retracing my steps, desperate to find the source of the problem. I never imagined that someone I considered a friend, someone I'd mentored and trusted, was quietly orchestrating my downfall. One morning, Daniel called me into his office. His face was unreadable, his tone clipped and formal. He slid a folder across the desk, filled with emails and documents that I'd never seen before. Messages supposedly sent from my account, leaking sensitive information, undermining the company's biggest projects. My heart pounded as I scanned the pages, my mind racing to make sense of it all. The evidence was damning, but I knew it wasn't real. I tried to explain, my voice trembling as I insisted there had to be a mistake, that someone was setting me up. But Daniel's eyes were cold, his jaw set. He told me the board had already seen the evidence, that they were demanding action. I reached for his hand, pleading with him to believe me, to remember everything we'd built together. But he pulled away, his trust in me already shattered. I could see the doubt in his eyes, the way he flinched when I tried to touch him. It was as if I'd become a stranger overnight. I begged him to listen, to give me a chance to prove my innocence. But he'd already made up his mind. The betrayal cut deeper than any accusation. It wasn't just my job on the line, it was my marriage, my reputation, my entire sense of self. I left his office in a daze, the walls closing in around me, the whispers of my colleagues suddenly deafening. I was alone, cast out by the one person I thought would always be on my side. And as the door closed behind me, I realized that everything I'd worked for, everything I believed in, was slipping through my fingers. The days that followed felt like a waking nightmare. I'd spent years pouring my heart into the company, building relationships, nurturing a team I thought of as family. Now, every message went unanswered, every call ignored. Friends I'd laughed with at company parties crossed the street to avoid me. My inbox, once overflowing with collaboration and gratitude, was silent. The world I'd helped create had turned its back on me, and the loneliness was suffocating. At first, I was paralyzed by shock and grief. I replayed every conversation, every decision, searching for the moment it all went wrong. I barely slept, haunted by the memory of Daniel's cold eyes and the sting of his rejection. But as the days dragged on, my despair hardened into something sharper. Anger. I refused to let a lie define me. I refused to let someone else's malice destroy everything I'd built. I started digging. I pored over old emails, searching for anything out of place. I reached out to the few people who hadn't completely abandoned me, asking careful questions, piecing together fragments of conversations. Most were too afraid to talk, but one former assistant, quietly let go months earlier, agreed to meet me in a quiet cafe. She told me about late-night meetings between Daniel and a senior executive, about files that had gone missing, about whispered conversations that stopped when she entered the room. Her words sent a chill down my spine. I realized I'd been so focused on the company's growth, on keeping Daniel happy, that I'd missed the warning signs. There were people who resented my influence, who saw me as an obstacle to their own ambitions. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. Someone had gone to great lengths to frame me, to poison Daniel's mind against me, to erase me from the company's story. I traced the fake emails to a shadowy IT contractor, someone I'd never met but who had access to everything. I found discrepancies in the company's financial records, small amounts siphoned off over months, hidden in plain sight. The pieces started to fit together, a web of deceit spun by someone who knew exactly how to exploit Daniel's insecurities and my trust. But the deeper I dug, the more dangerous the truth became. I started receiving anonymous messages, warning me to stop asking questions. My car was keyed in the parking lot of my apartment. One night, I came home to find my front door ajar, a chilling reminder that I was being watched. Fear threatened to paralyze me, but I refused to back down. I was determined to clear my name, no matter the cost. I realized that the conspiracy went deeper than I'd imagined. It wasn't just about jealousy or ambition. It was about power, about control, about someone willing to destroy anyone who stood in their way. I felt a surge of determination, a fire I hadn't felt in months. I would not let them win. I would not let Daniel's faith in me be the final casualty of their scheme. But as I pieced together the final clues, I stumbled onto something I never expected. A secret that could destroy not just my marriage, but the entire company. And in that moment, I knew I was standing on the edge of something far bigger than myself. The truth was out there waiting to be revealed. But was I ready for what I might find? The breakthrough came late one night when exhaustion and determination finally collided. I'd been poring over security logs, cross-referencing access times, and email records when a pattern emerged, one that pointed directly to Olivia, the company's chief operating officer. Olivia, who had always been friendly, who'd toasted my birthday and sent flowers when I was sick. But beneath her polished exterior, she'd been quietly orchestrating my downfall, manipulating Daniel, and covering her tracks with chilling precision. I found the smoking gun, a series of encrypted messages between Olivia and the IT contractor, discussing how to plant evidence and ensure Daniel would see it first. The betrayal stung, but it was also liberating. For the first time since this nightmare began, I had proof. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't incompetent. I was the target of a calculated attack. With the evidence in hand, I sat alone in my apartment, the city lights flickering outside my window. I thought about everything I'd lost, my job, my friends, the man I loved. I thought about the years I'd spent building something beautiful, only to watch it be twisted by someone else's ambition. The pain was still there, raw and aching, but beneath it, something new was growing. Resolve. I realized I didn't need Daniel's validation to know my worth. I didn't need anyone's permission to stand up for myself. I could confront him, show him the truth, but I no longer needed his belief to define me. I was done begging for trust I'd already earned. I was done letting someone else's lies dictate my future. I knew what I had to do, even if it broke my heart. I walked into Daniel's office for the last time, my heart pounding but my hands steady. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face, but I didn't give him a chance to speak. I placed the folder on his desk, the evidence I'd gathered, emails, financial records, messages that spelled out the truth in black and white. For a moment, he just stared at it, confusion and disbelief warring in his eyes. "Read it," I said, my voice calm, stronger than I felt. He opened the folder, flipping through the pages, his face draining of color as the reality set in. I watched the man I'd loved for so long, the man who had once been my partner in everything, realize just how deeply he'd been played. He looked up at me, searching for something, maybe forgiveness, maybe understanding, but I had nothing left to give. How did I not see this?" he whispered, his voice breaking. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I shook my head, the ache in my chest sharp and familiar. "I tried, Daniel. I begged you to listen. But you'd already decided I was guilty. You let someone else's lies destroy everything we built together." He reached for my hand, desperation in his eyes, but I pulled away. "You didn't just fire me from the company. You fired me from our life. You chose to believe the worst about me, and you did it without a second thought." He started to protest, but I stopped him. "This isn't about Olivia, or the company, or even the lies. This is about trust, about the fact that when it mattered most, you didn't have mine." I took a deep breath and slid a second envelope across the desk, divorce papers, signed and ready. His eyes widened, shock and regret etched across his face. "No, please don't do this. We can fix this. I was wrong, I see that now. I'll make it right." Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "You can't fix what you broke, Daniel. Not with apologies, not with promises. I spent years believing in us, fighting for us, but I won't fight alone anymore. I deserve better than suspicion and betrayal." He stood, coming around the desk, but I stepped back. "I'm done begging for your trust. I'm done letting your doubts define me. I know who I am and I know what I'm worth. I hope one day you'll understand what you lost, but I can't wait for you to catch up." He sank into his chair, defeated, the weight of his choices settling on his shoulders. I saw the realization dawn in his eyes. Too late, always too late. The power dynamic had shifted, and for the first time, I felt free, vindicated, heartbroken, yes, but no longer powerless. I turned to leave, pausing at the door. "You should be careful who you trust, Daniel. Not everyone who smiles at you is your friend, and not everyone who loves you will wait forever." As I walked out, I felt the weight of the past fall away. The pain was still there, but it was no longer in control. And as the door closed behind me, I knew I was finally ready to start over. He realized too late what he'd lost. In the days that followed, The truth spread through the company like wildfire. Olivia's betrayal was exposed, her carefully constructed lies unraveling under the weight of evidence. She was escorted out, her reputation in ruins, and the board scrambled to contain the fallout. Investors demanded answers, employees whispered in the hallways, and the company Daniel and I had built together teetered on the edge of chaos. Daniel tried to pick up the pieces, but the damage was done. His confidence was shaken, his leadership questioned, and the loneliness he'd chosen became painfully real. For me, the world outside the company felt both terrifying and exhilarating. I had to start from scratch, but for the first time in years, I was free to choose my own path. I reached out to old friends, some of whom welcomed me back with open arms, others who needed time to understand the truth. I found support in unexpected places, former colleagues who admired my strength, new acquaintances who saw my potential, and even strangers who'd heard my story and offered encouragement. I poured my energy into new projects, rediscovering the passion that had once fueled my dreams. I took risks, made mistakes, and learned to trust myself again. There were days when the pain of betrayal threatened to pull me under, but I refused to let it define me. Each small victory, a successful pitch, a new partnership, a genuine laugh, became a building block for the life I was creating on my own terms. Daniel reached out a few times, his messages filled with regret and apologies. He wanted to talk, to explain, to make amends. I listened, but I didn't let his words sway me. I'd spent too long waiting for him to see my worth. Now, I was learning to see it for myself. The company would survive, or it wouldn't, but I was no longer responsible for holding it, or Daniel, together. As the dust settled, I realized that losing everything I thought I needed had given me the chance to find out who I really was. The pain was still there, a scar that would never fully fade, but it was no longer a wound. It was a reminder of how far I'd come, and how much further I could go. But my story wasn't over yet. A year later, my life looks nothing like I once imagined, and I'm grateful for that. I've built a new career, surrounded myself with people who value honesty and kindness, and learned to trust my instincts again. There are still moments when the past tugs at me, but they're softer now, reminders of how far I've come rather than chains holding me back. I've discovered a strength I never knew I had. I'm no longer defined by someone else's opinion or limited by their doubts. I've learned that self-worth isn't something you earn from others. It's something you claim for yourself every single day. The pain of betrayal taught me resilience, and the loss of my old life gave me the freedom to create something better. If you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever felt lost or broken, remember, sometimes losing everything is how you find yourself.